Okay, so some species identification. We're looking at two different species of trees here. We are up at around 5,000 feet in elevation, and that's our first kind of clue as to what kind of tree we're seeing here. Over here we have a Douglas fir. We can tell that it's a Douglas fir when we know it's a fir because of the needles. They're attaching directly to the branches. And we know that it's a Douglas fir because those needles are attached all the way around the branch, okay? So this is our Douglas fir, Pseudotsuga menziesii. And then right here we have a red fir. This one's harder for us to find in our area because you have to go up in elevation. If you want to find one, you can actually go up to Mount Ashland. They have quite a few in that area. Some things to note about this tree. This one's a small one. They typically get very large, but they definitely have very clear branching as you move up. Second thing to note is their needles. Their needles all are very, very dense, and they all face upward. Whereas remember with our Douglas fir, they were all the way around, right? So again, very, very dense. You can see as I run my finger through them that they're not going to detach. You can also see on the very bottom that they have what, I don't know, I call them hockey stick shaped. That's how they attach. So that's another good way of identifying them. And then my favorite way of identifying them is when I look underneath. So especially when they are taller, they look like a snowflake to me. So they're very clear, they're very evenly branched out, and you can see they're very straight. So that snowflake pattern is a very clear indication that it's a red fir. All right, so we are up near Wagner Butte, so we're just outside of Talent, and this is a really cool spot right here because this is a perfect transition zone. We're at about 5,500 feet in elevation, and elevation is really important because it's one of the abiotic factors that drives transition zones of where we're gonna see lots of different trees. So in this spot right here, it's super cool because we can see our green leaf manzanita, right? This is oftentimes in more warm areas, but we have it right here. We have our red firs, some of the best Christmas trees because they have those dense needles and they all face up. We have our Douglas fir. Remember, this is our fake fir. It's got the large terminal buds at the very end and needles that go all the way around. Not only do we have those three species, but we also have a white fir. So these are the ones that have, their needles are more open. They've got small terminal buds. And if you look even farther behind me, we even have some ponderosa pines. So remember the difference between pines and firs. Pines have those bundles, and the ponderosa pine has bundles of 3, which is why it makes them have that kind of shaggy look. Pretty cool. So you don't have to go far to be able to find some of the species that we are learning about in class. Right now I'm in Forest Park. It's outside Jacksonville. From school in Central Point, it's only about 10 to 15 minute drive, and we're much lower in elevation. So right now we're at about 1,900 feet in elevation, much lower than our Red Bluffs or Wagner Butte field trip. And you can also tell that this area is much wetter, and because there's a creek right that runs right down the middle of it. So we're gonna go explore this park and look for some species that we can find at this lower elevation. Now, as you can tell, these trees have lost their leaves because it's fall, but we can look at the ground for some of the evidence, including this tree right here. So as we take a look at this tree, or at least this leaf, we notice a couple of things, some identifying features. We can see that it is palmately lobed. Remember that vein radiates from the inside out. like a finger or like a hand, and then it's also lobed. So what's your idea as to what tree this belongs to? And even better, can you figure out the scientific name? It's right along the creek that's right here. This is going to be our big leaf maple, Acer microphyllum. The first place that you get when you're in Jacksonville's Forest Park is the Jackson Creek wetlands. And what's cool is that this area has been developed a little bit so that there's a nice walking path and there's signs that allow you to identify the trees and some of the native plants in the area. And again, it's fall, so we can't look up into the trees to work with our identification, but remember, bark is helpful and the leaves that we find on the ground are also helpful. This is another one of our native broad leaves. So a couple of the identifying features that we'll notice is that it is heart-shaped, it's very broad, it's pointed at the end, and there's just a little bit of that serration, which means that it's got the little toothed margin along the edges. So this is going to be which kind of tree? Normally when we're in class, I love taking students out into this park. One, it's my favorite park. And also I love that there's been a lot of restoration that's happening. So people are coming out and helping to plant native trees, just like this one. So this is our conifer. And if you notice, it has those jointed green needles. It's definitely not a Western juniper because it's in too wet of an environment. So habitat is important when we're looking to identify our different species of plants. So, but we have it's green, it's jointed, it's scaly, it has red flaky bark. Whenever it's nice and big, they grow huge. So what we're looking at right here is an incense cedar. And what's cool is that we have some of those placards that are right next to it that help give you a little bit of what's called the natural history about that tree. In this ecosystem that we have right here, we are on a south-facing slope, which means that it's going to get a lot more sunshine. It's going to be warmer and drier, which are some abiotic factors that are going to drive what we can find in this area. It's going to be much drier and warmer than our ecosystems like down by the creek, where we're going to be finding our cottonwoods, maples, cedars, those sorts of plants. So what we're going to find right here are organisms like our California black oak. California black oaks, remember, have those pinnately lobed, pointed lobed leaves. So we can find these typically underneath. They're going to have a little bit more shade than maybe our Oregon white oaks. Other things that we can also find here are our Pacific madrones. So they've got that red peely bark, big, thick, leathery leaves. They are angiosperms, which means that they produce red berries. And they're also evergreen, which is kind of interesting. Back behind, it's a little thin, so you can't really see it from where you are, but there's a ponderosa pine. So remember, needles of 3 or bundles of 3. Back behind me, we have the tree that Oregon is known for, the Douglas fir. And then right here on the ground, we have our state flower. Thick, leathery leaves that are spiky at the end. This is going to be our Oregon grape. And you can find it all over the forest floor. Well, I hope that you had fun seeing a couple of different places that you can find just outside of our Rogue Valley. I know that a virtual hike is not as good as being in person. I so wish that we could have experiences like this together. But you know what? I really hope that this inspires you to get outside, get to the amazing places that are literally in our backyard, sometimes even just in your own neighborhood, to identify these really cool species, find different ecosystems. We are so lucky to live in Oregon because I can be at 1,900 feet in elevation. There's no snow, it's beautiful, and I get to go for a hike. So I highly encourage all of you to do what you can to try to get outside, to do some of this identification on your own, and just, it's gonna help you feel better too. So keep exploring. Thanks so much for being with me today, and I hope you had fun.